Since the video gets quite detailed and talks about the professional carbon fiber spear shaft too much, here's a simplified version talking about the installation of wooden shafts. First, if your diameter of your spear shaft is longer than the sheath component inside, you need to shave it off a bit until it reaches around 25mm in size. You need to shave off the first 7.5 centimeter or so to make sure it can fit perfectly and slide down right to the bottom of the sheath component. The rest, around 15 centimeter, needs to be able to slide in the spearhead itself overall. For compression installation, that is a recommended method, you need a spear shaft that is slightly smaller than the sheath component itself. Wrap some compressive tape like EVA tape perhaps. Make sure it is slightly larger in diameter than the sheath, then push it in really hard. When done successfully, this method is perfect and you won't be able to pull it off even with two people. On the other hand, glue may work, but make sure you're not dripping down the glue into the sheath because there's a hole on the bottom. Here's a fully assembled spearhead with a sliding sheath located on the inside. You can test it out using a rod or even a steel sword to push it in. In this demonstration, I'll be holding this sheath component for clarity purposes. In reality, the sheath component will be located inside Spearhead itself. And there is a complicated method with nail installation if you take out the sheath component itself. The sheath looks something like this, and the inner diameter of the sheath is 24mm. If you are using a carbon fiber spear shaft, then it should be perfectly fine. If you are using a wooden spear shaft, it would depend on the specific diameter of the wooden spear shaft. Because of the newer streamlined design, you may need to cut some additional distance down the wooden spear shaft because you need first at least 7.5 centimeters of headspace to plug into the sheath itself, and then you will require more space, as I will demonstrate next. The reason that you have to shave some additional area down below the sheath of a thicker wooden shaft is because the wooden shaft will enter the entire device to go forward, even after you insert it into the sleeve. You need at least 15 centimeters of shaven space that can go into the spearhead assembly, and make sure your diameter is below 24mm. Make sure that your front 15 centimeters is at most 24mm on the way in, or else it might get a little stuck. First, we'll demonstrate a method of installation based on friction and compression, applicable to shafts with a smaller diameter than the sheath itself. You can either install this with glue and tape, or using a method that we will demonstrate now. First, install your very thin shaft toward the bottom and make a mark on how far you can go. The mark should be around 7.5 centimeters, and you shall need this because it can occur for wooden shafts where they are a bit thicker at a certain point that you think you have installed all the way in but haven't. Please mark to prevent this scenario from happening. And then you may use a tape with compressive properties, for example, EVA foam tape, to make a surface of friction and compression. The video example will use 2mm thick EVA foam tip. You tape it around as the demonstration, and after several layers, you will exceed the available diameter inside the sheath. But this is intended because once you plug the spear shaft in, there will be a great amount of compressive force keeping the spear shaft in place. During the installation, you will install this by force, perhaps against the ground. If installed correctly, it will be extremely difficult to extract. In our practice, as long as you install with a reliability where you cannot pull it apart with two people alone, it would be sufficient. Do note that you shouldn't expose too much tape after the sheathed area to prevent the generation of additional friction between the exposed spear shaft and the overall socket component itself. As we had discussed earlier, the appropriate length overall should be around 7.5 centimeters. We need to emphasize that the friction method is the most non-invasive option available. Because if done right, the friction and compression method can allow for two people pulling on the spearhead without letting it loose. If you still have concern, you can use the traditional method. As you may observe, there's a hole reserved at the very top. As long as you shave your spear shaft, fit it in. If your spear shaft is wooden, you may drill a screw along with a pad to secure it in place. Furthermore, we have reserved two holes on the side of the sleeve that allows you to put a thread or a rope through while tying a strong knot to secure the spear shaft in place. In online tutorials, you may be able to look up these type of strong pole tying knots. The friction will be powerful enough that even stainless steel rods like these can be secured in place.